Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are going to get started in just a minute. As we're starting, I want you to recognize that this time is designed for you. And yes, I'm speaking to you. So when you're here, please make sure that the best way to make this about you is to use that chat to interact with us, to tell us why you're here. And we could start by getting to know each other by letting us know, how has math homework been going for your student or students? And I know we've got a variety of caregivers on the call today. I'm sure we also have a bunch of educators on the call today. So feel free to speak from whatever role is most relevant for you. I am Stacy Gershkovich, and I am the leader at the Robertson Center, where we bring a little bit of what the work we're doing at Success Academies to the external world. Today's event is really designed for caregivers to help kind of rethink and reapproach and rejuvenate ourselves about our role and how we can support our kids at home with their math homework and with math learning more generally. I share from you as an educator, as well as a parent. I have 3 kids myself, and so math homework is a big part of my life as well. I know people are just joining on, so as you come on, if you didn't hear me before, please introduce yourself in the chat and let us know how math homework has been going for your students. We'll make sure that we use those comments and those thoughts in the conversation today. So we're really excited. Great, thank you, Jim. We're really excited to kind of hear what you're thinking and what you're experiencing today. So our event today is going to first talk a little bit about what math homework is really designed for and what our role as caregivers is. And I think there's some misconceptions around this. So we'll talk a little bit about your role. We're also going to do a little bit of math, because the best way to support our students is to get in their shoes and realize what it is that they're going through as they're doing their math homework. And then we're going to get a chance to watch a video of a parent, also a success educator. Kristen Jefferson is going to show us a video of her supporting her daughter with their math homework, and we'll talk a little bit about what we see her doing. At the very end, we'll have time for a question and answer. So to the extent that you have specific questions that aren't answered or you want to make sure are absolutely answered, please make sure you go ahead and put them in the Q&A. You can see that at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Put them in the Q&A and we'll make sure we get to as many questions as we can. To the extent that we can't get to a question, we will be using social media. We have a hashtag #ChatWithRC, but we'll be using Twitter to also follow up on questions. So to the extent we don't get to yours, please take a look at our Twitter. We can always follow up there as well. Okay, so you see here that our goal of today's webinar is to really be about making you walk away feeling more comfortable, more confident, more excited about supporting your child with mathematics at home, and really not about just solving problems, but really about how do we encourage mathematical thinking at home, because that is the goal of mathematics. It's not about learning geometry. It's not about learning algebra, although those are important things. It's really about developing the type of mathematical thinking that you can use to approach any problem that you see in your life moving forward. So I pulled one of many, many, many funny memes or funny quotes that we can find on the internet, just to remind ourselves that this is hard. It's not easy for anyone, but also to remind ourselves that your job is not to try to learn math, because you are not the math teacher. Thankfully, all of our kids have math teachers, unless you're a homeschooler, and then therefore you are a math teacher. But at the same time, I know you got this. You're doing a great job probably already. The fact that you're here today says a lot about your priorities. But we'll also make sure that you walk away really feeling a little bit different than Simon does right here. Okay, so for the fun part, I told you that the best way to learn how to support our students is to put ourselves in our students' shoes. And I think so often we forget what it feels like to be a student. So on the board here, on the screen here, you see a math problem. And so I'm going to pause speaking for a moment, and I want everyone to think about this math problem. And I don't want to know the answer. It is absolutely great if you can get the answer. You can give yourself a little pat on the back. But what I want to hear from you in the chat is, what are you thinking and why? What's your prediction? Do you have a prediction? What might you do first to solve this problem? Why did you take this approach? How did you feel while working through it? So again, it's not about the right answer, but you can talk through any of these problems. I'll pause speaking, take a moment, think about this problem. Okay, so I'm assuming that you did not solve this problem. I wasn't expecting you to solve the problem. I apologize, the right side of the screen is blocked. We are making it, the gray blocks are moving. They're still there, we know, but hopefully you can see the problem now. So Anna says the ox will win. Other thoughts? So we have some thoughts about the answer, but I would love to know what your predictions are and why. We got your predictions. What'd you do to solve this problem? Or how did it feel when you solved this problem? When I stopped talking and you were left alone with math, it might have been the first time in a while. How did it feel? Yeah, there we go. I see some chats coming in. It's hard to solve, absolutely. This is a problem where it's a little bit hard to figure out where to start, particularly in the first minute. You're like, uh-oh, what do I do? Intimidating, I heard someone say. Annoying, Linda, absolutely. Overwhelming, right? Again, our students, depending on the age of your students, might not see this exact problem. But, and I'm going to put it up here again, just so we can have the conversation. Hopefully there's no gray blocks anymore. But what you're noticing is that, there we go. But what we're noticing is that it is a little bit overwhelming. And I want us to remember that, because our kids are, whether they're 5 or 10 or 15, they're also seeing math problems that are overwhelming sometimes at first glance. Nora, I love the way you say this. It might not be the same way as my daughter sees it, right? And that's a really important piece to keep in mind, that the way that I see it might be different than the way Ruben sees it, that might be different than the way Doris sees it. And all of the folks on this call probably look at this problem a little bit different. As you saw, some folks had an answer pretty quickly. Other folks might not even have an answer yet. Great. We're going to keep working, but I want you to keep this question in mind, keep these feelings in mind, because we're going to get a chance to go back to this question at the end once we've had a time to talk a little further. Okay, so one of the things we want to speak about is what we're expecting from homework. And one of the things that I know as a parent myself, I get a little nervous about making sure my child gets the right answer, right? That seems to be really important. And I know as an educator that, or even as a parent, that I could spend a lot of time helping my student get to the right answer for that question. And then tomorrow, when they bring back a similar question, they struggle again. And so one of the things that we have been talking a lot about at Success Academies, and we want to make sure that you guys are starting to think about, is that our goal of math instruction, and particularly the goal of math homework, is not about getting the right answer only, but it's about supporting our kids' development of persistence. It's about having our students grow. And the only way we're going to allow our students to grow and develop their growth is to really let them struggle, is to let them be the ones doing the thinking. I know that the majority of us, particularly when our kids are in kindergarten, first and second grade, can help show our students how to solve the problem. But us showing us children to solve the problem is not doing what we need our students to do. We need our students to be the ones who take ownership over the problem and learn how to persist even when the question is hard. So how do we do that? Rather than tell our students, why don't you watch how I do it and let's talk about it, or why don't you do this first, or other ways that we lead our students to the correct answer, we want to think about how we can ask students questions, ask our children questions that help to encourage their thinking. So here you see a bunch of questions that are not specific to any specific problem, but are general enough that they could be used to ask students to explain their thinking, ask them to tell us more about what's going on in their brain, ask them to maybe unpack a question even further. What do you know, or what do you notice, is one of the most powerful questions that you hear asked in our classrooms every day. And we're going into just a moment, watch how one of our math educators at Success Academies uses these types of questions to support her daughter at home. So I'm going to stop sharing right now so we can put the video up. But as you observe, I want you to think about, how does Miss Jefferson encourage thinking, right? Knowing that her goal is not to teach her student math, but her goal is to encourage her student to do the thinking. Think about, what is she doing that encourages her daughter to think? Give us just a minute as we get that video up.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kaden. I'm in 7th grade. I'm 11 years old and I'm in Hudson Yards Middle School.
We are here today to basically work on an exit ticket. Can you show your screen? Work on an exit ticket that she got incorrect during class, and we are going to revise so that she can get credit and, of course, increase her GPA. So let's just start now. All right, so read to me the question that you had.
A scale's reading has an error of 1% or less. If the scale shows a reading of 9.09 grams per pebble, what is the range of possible values for the actual mass of this pebble?
Okay, so I have out my pen and paper, and honestly also my phone, because sometimes I may need a calculator, whereas she has it all in her head. Okay, so I noticed that you highlighted some things in purple. Why? What did you highlight and why?
I highlighted an error of 1% or less.
Why'd you highlight that?
It can either be more than 1% of the actual value or less than 1% of the actual value?
How do you know that? Like you're just saying automatically, like that can be more or less than 1%, but how do you know?
Because it's an error of 1%, meaning it's not going to be exactly the grams that's on the scale.
So
Okay. So we just saw a couple of things that I want to just highlight. One, don't worry about the problem. Don't worry about the Mercator is set in 7th grade and you might have a kindergartner or you might have a 12th grader. The work that we're talking about, the things that you hear Kristen saying are the same things that apply no matter what type of math your child is doing. So first, she says, why did you highlight? How do you know that? This is all, yes, thank you, Patrick. Why did you highlight? These are all questions that Kristen is asking her daughter before her daughter even attempts to resolve the problem. As she mentioned, this is a problem she did in school and she's redoing it for homework. So before she even talks about the solution, before Kristen even looks at the work that her child did, she's making sure that her child understands the question. And this is a really important piece that so often we forget to do. Going back to that question that we saw with the ox and the elephant, as you said, you got really overwhelmed in the beginning. So putting ourselves in our scholars' shoes, our scholars are probably often really overwhelmed when they look at a problem, right? And so taking the time to really help make sure that our child understands the question and what the question is asking is really important. And as you can see, Kristen is there doing that by asking the questions. Why did you highlight what you highlighted? And how did you know that, right? It wasn't about Kristen telling her the answer. It was about her eliciting that thinking from her daughter. Okay, we'll keep going.
Well, first, I think we should find what 1% is. So I create a ratio table and it would have percent and grams.
why grams?
Because in the problem, we see it says 9.09 grams, so grams is the unit.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, pausing again. You saw a moment, and if you see it in the chat, think about it. But we saw a moment where Mercator is doing something, she writes grams. Kristen asks a really simple question, why? One of the things Kristen is really doing here is listening to her daughter.
Yeah.
She's listening to her daughter and trying to figure out, can I follow what she's saying? Does it make sense to me? If it doesn't make sense to me, then it probably doesn't make sense. So really asking our students those questions, the why, if we can't follow their thinking, asking them to explain it more clearly to us is a great way to see if they truly understand what they're doing or if they're just solving without really thinking.
And 100 goes into 90 0 times, but it goes into 909 9 times, so minus 900.
I use the calculator.
Which would be 9.
Okay, I have to pause there. You know you guys can use a calculator. There is no reason that you can't use a calculator. That doesn't mean your child is allowed to use a calculator, right? Or use some kind of other web device that will get them the answer. We want our students, if the homework says not to use a calculator, make sure that your scholar's not using a calculator, but certainly you should be able to use a calculator to help you make sure that you know what the answer is so that you can make sure that you're checking their work.
What are you thinking first? Talk me through what you're thinking.
Well, maybe to make it easier, I could, since it's always going to be a 0 after, I can remove 2 extra zeros as there's more values.
What do you mean more values?
So in 9.09, we only have 0, 9, but in 0.0909, we also have the extra 0, 9.
Does that change the value of the number?
And 2 zeros?
Yeah.
No, because it's just a 0, meaning it won't really change. So like if we did 10 Put as 9, and then this would now be 18 because 10 plus 8 equals 18. 18 minus 9 is 9,
Okay.
and then 9 minus 0.
Is that
Okay, a couple of more questions from Kristen, all open-ended questions. Patrick, I see you have it in the chat. What are you thinking first is what she said. What I want you to notice here is who is doing the thinking, who is doing the heavy lifting. If it is us, the adults that are doing the heavy lifting, that are doing the thinking, that are dragging our students along, that is not helping our students. But I think in this exchange, you can see that Kristen is asking probing questions, but McCaden is the one who's really doing the thinking. And that's what we're trying to get at, no matter what level our scholars are at. Yes, parents
this
do
is the
very heavy
number?
lifting.
Read this number off.
8.991.
Read that again.
8.9, no, 8.9991.
Okay, and what number did you write here?
8.099.
Okay, is that the same number? No, so you got to make sure you copy the numbers correctly. Of what you did up here, and then what we did down here, you see a difference in answers. What answers did you provide here?
Okay, so you saw a moment there where obviously McCaden at this point is clear that she understands the mathematics, but she made a mistake in copying, right? We call it an accuracy mistake. These mistakes happen all of the time. And it's really important for us to differentiate my child doesn't understand the mathematics from my child is making a silly mistake, making maybe a computational mistake. Maybe my child certainly knows what 8 plus 7 is, but is writing down 14. Those are areas where we just want to hold our kids accountable. That doesn't mean we fix it. We just say, I think she said, well, is that the same as what you wrote, right? And McCaden is recognizing, no, actually, I copied it wrong.
Well, for the max, I put the actual value. For the minimum, I put the 1%.
Right, so you didn't actually answer the question correctly, but it seems like, can you jot that down right here for the max? You put what?
The actual value.
Yep, so you just copied that from the question.
And over here, I put the 1%.
Okay, so it seems though, as though, one, there's a difference of the amount of work that you put in here, right? When you did it in school versus the amount of work that it actually took to solve the problem, right? But you had the knowledge and the thinking to do that independently, okay? Also, it seems like you were halfway there because you identified the actual value and you identified the 1%, but you stopped there. And this is actually more than just a one-step problem, right? Cool. The only other thing that I'm going to tell you is you got to copy the answers correctly. Otherwise, all the work that you put in is going to be wrong based on what you put on the answer line. All righty. All right. Any questions for me?
No.
Cool. Thank you. Do you want to say bye?
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you to McCaden and to her mother, Kristen Jefferson, for allowing us to come into their home. So big thanks to them. And Kristen was going to join us today, but got caught up in a lot of different stuff at school. So thank you, Kristen. And again, thank you, McCaden. But wanted to just highlight what we saw at the end of that exchange. At the end of that exchange, we saw, sorry, I'm just getting our PowerPoint back up there. At the end of the exchange, we saw Miss Jefferson is giving her student feedback. And that feedback is not about this problem. It's really about every problem her daughter will see moving forward. You probably can remember a little bit about the feedback she gave, but I recall her saying something to the effect of, look at the amount of work that you did at home versus here. You clearly knew how to solve this problem, right? She's telling her, I didn't help you solve this problem, but what I helped you do was really to make sure that you did the type of work that you need to get the answer. And then she also gives her feedback around copying correctly, right? Which was something we saw her discuss. So one of the things that I would just encourage you to think about is the importance of the conversation after the homework is done, to have our children either self-reflect on what they're going to do differently next time and all times moving forward, but then also, to the extent that your child doesn't self-reflect, just telling them what it is that they need to do differently moving forward. So let's go back to that original question that we discussed. Okay. I probably just putting that on the screen brings back a lot of feelings. You might now understand how Makeda was feeling when she first saw that question in her classroom. And obviously all of our students are different. So I want you to take a minute and describe your mathematician. If you have a specific mathematician that you can kind of sum up in a sentence or two, go ahead in the chat. I'll let you know that I have a mathematician who is in a rush to solve every problem, and kind of solves before really, in my mind, thinking about what it is that he's trying to do. I've got another mathematician at home who gets frustrated really easily. And if the problem is perceived to be too difficult, it's kind of, I give up, I don't know what to do, please help me. So she appeals for help. I've got Denise, you've got an anxious child at home, certainly. So anyone else can feel free to describe their mathematician at home. Oh, someone who doesn't want to show their work. Yes, absolutely. A lot of kids have that. I actually have one of those too. A rushing scholar. Yes, that is hits home to me. So thinking about your particular kid, and we can talk through some of these scenarios in a minute. If they were doing this problem, which may or may not be appropriate depending on their age, but what are some of the questions that you might want to ask them if this was the problem that they were going to solve? So I'll give an example. My rusher. I've got a rusher at home. He wants to kind of get through his homework so he can go on with the rest of his day. And often he does his homework on his own. He brings it to me, and there's a lot of erasing that goes on because we have to start fresh. So if I were supporting him with this puzzle, I would say, before you take your pencil and pick it up, tell me what you know. Tell me what you notice. Tell me what you're thinking, right? And I would try to get him to verbalize a little bit of what he's thinking before he started to write things down. Other thoughts? I know we have our anxious mathematicians. I think that similar approach would be really helpful for an anxious mathematician. Rather than, what's the answer? I would start by saying, what do you know? Don't worry about 5 steps later. Really get that child to tell you, what do I know? Well, I know that 4 ox are the same as 5 horses. I know that, maybe I know that 2 ox are the same as 2.5 horses, right? Getting them to share what they're thinking. They might share that elephants are strong, right? And that might not be about mathematics, but they just know that. And in this problem, it's clear that an elephant is strong as 1 ox and 2 horses. Get them talking. The more that you can get them talking before they start to solve the problem, the more they'll realize they do know a lot. Okay, a scholar who hates questions. So in a situation like that, maybe I don't ask them questions. Maybe I just say, you convince me of the answer. You're telling me that, I can't remember what you guys said, if you thought the left side wins or the right side wins, but let's say you think the left side wins, convince me. That's all you have to say. Have them try to convince you, but make sure that you're really convinced. Be skeptical and make sure you really listen to your children. The writing things down, I love to give my child who doesn't want to write things down, that's my rusher, doesn't want to write things down. I love to give him short ways to write things down. He finds it really fun when he gets shortcuts. So rather than write out the word elephant, I have him write the letter E or draw an arrow to the elephant. I find that really helps, giving him shorter ways to write things down. One of the things we say in school is we don't want to tell our students what to think. but we can certainly help them represent those thoughts in a really simple way. Oh, Tiffany, a scholar who will ask you if he's correct every step of the problem. That is a great problem. We have a lot of kids who are like that, particularly our anxious children, or particularly our kids who are not feeling confident about mathematics. What I would say there is, well, what do you think? Tell me how you got to the step, and have them explain their thinking so they can convince themselves. Again, that's really that's the most important thing that we can help our scholars with. We want our scholars to have the confidence so that they can do this work without us there. And we're trying to work ourselves out of a job, right? Yeah, Linda, that's a great question to get kids started. What's going on in the picture? What do we think we're trying to figure out here? That's the piece about investing in the question, and that's a really important piece. Is there any scholar prototype that I didn't get to? Obviously, I know every kid is really unique and different, but I think I got to the majority of the ones that we put in the chat. But if I didn't, please let us know. Okay. We're going to keep going, but as you know, we have a question and answer coming up in about 2 or 3 minutes. So to the extent that you have a specific question about a specific child or a specific problem that you're facing at home, please go ahead and put it in that Q&A and we'll make sure we get to it. One that's afraid to get it wrong. Absolutely, Linda. That's a great question. So if a child's afraid to get it wrong, I think it depends a little bit on how that comes out there. But that's where I would say, well, let's not focus on the answer. I don't even want you to answer it. You're not allowed to answer this problem. What I want you to do is just tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you know so far. And taking that pressure off of the answer and focusing it on what they know, what they feel confident about, will help them get to the answer eventually. Double checking work, absolutely. One of my kids hates checking his work. In fact, when I tried to take a video of him for this, and he finally, for the first time after like 3 years of me telling him to check his work, he finally said to me, I think I should start checking my work. It seems to be really helpful for me. So Doris, I feel for you. I would just encourage you to help as many times as you can point out where they're making silly mistakes and they're getting questions wrong. Eventually they will decide that it's worthwhile, it's worth their time on how to double check the work. Yeah, Ruben, that's a great one. A child who the thinking is absolutely correct, but they're making a couple of mistakes. And so their answer is wrong, even though their thinking is correct. And I think it's really important. I say this to my son all the time. You know this mathematics. I know you know this math. I can see you know the mathematics. I can see it because I saw you do X, Y, and Z. But your answer is still incorrect. And it's not because you don't know the mathematics. It's because you're making a silly mistake. And so just really giving that child the feedback that they really do understand the mathematics, but the fact that at the end of the day, their answer is still incorrect. But it's a really easy fix. They can definitely fix that one. And they can fix it by Tiffany's folks and Doris's folks by making sure that they can double check their work, right? That will make sure that the person looking at their work really knows and understands that you do know this mathematics and that you do really understand what you do. And we would hate for someone not to realize how great your understanding is. Okay, we could talk about this forever. We're going to continue this conversation, get those questions in the chat. But I just want to leave with these thoughts while you're putting these questions in the chat. Again, our goal here, especially at homework, right? It's a little bit different goal in mathematics, but you are not the math teacher, right? Unless you're the homeschooler, you are not the math teacher, you are the math parent. And our job is to help in the school and at home. Our number one goal is that we want our students to love mathematics, and we want them to really encourage and be excited about what mathematics can do. So be positive, right? Focus on one problem, focus on growth, right? It's not about If my child is getting 0 answers correct, I'm going to say to him, tomorrow, when you do your homework, I want to see you get 1 answer correct, right? If my child is getting 5 answers correct, or 5 answers right, but they're making a lot of accuracy mistakes, I'm going to say, you know what? I want to see today if you can solve at least 1 whole problem with no silly mistakes, right? Giving them reasonable goals, but being positive about what it is that they are doing well. Use those 7 prompts. Jackie just put them in the chat again. There's other questions you can ask for sure, but the point of these prompts is that it makes the child do the thinking, not you do the thinking. You're not saying, well, what if you first added 7 and 10? Or what if you first figured out how much 1 oxen is? We really want to make sure that the students are the ones that are guiding the thinking, and they are bringing us with them, not us bringing them with us on our kind of journey in the way we solve the problems. Creative thinking is great. As you know, this new approach to mathematics is really trying to value the way different students think about different things. So just because your scholar starts a problem or thinks about a problem differently than you, doesn't mean it is bad, wrong, or incorrect. Really just think about listening to that child and seeing if they can make it help make sense for you, explain their thinking. Embrace the struggle. One of the most important things about mathematics in life, mathematicians will tell you, is that you can't give up. And if we can encourage our students and we can build their persistence, that's what's going to make them successful in life. So I think above all else, if you can forget about handing in homework that has 5 perfectly right answers, but was gotten 2 because the parents supported, or because there was a lot of arguing and fighting at home, I think we're doing our students a disservice. If we can focus on getting our kids to embrace the struggle a little bit more than they did the day before, for that student gets really overwhelmed, give them a little bit more, if they get something down on the paper when they previously did not, that's a really good step. And then lastly, ask for help. If you're not sure what to do or how to support your child, ask the teacher for help. Sometimes it helps to see the work the scholar's doing in school. So if you're not sure the level of work your child's capable of, ask them to send home a sample of what it looks like when they do it in school. And feel free to use that teacher to figure out, do you want all the right answers? Or are you okay if I send in a homework, even if there's incorrect answers? So I am just going to leave, before we go to the Q&A, we've got one quick video. As I mentioned, I tried to capture a video for this, but it was not usable because this is what my house sounded like during homework time. So just a reminder that it's really easy to sit here and talk about how fabulous math can be, but we all have realities and we've got to make the most and do the best we can. Oops, didn't mean to show that again. Okay, so let's turn it over to the Q&A. Okay. How do you frame the objective of the right answer with different mathematical thinking? So, I think this really, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I'm understanding that the person is asking, even though we're approaching the problems differently, for most math problems, there is one right answer. And so I would just encourage, 1, some of the problems we send home don't have one right answer. There's multiple right answers, and be aware of that. But 2, there's different ways to approach getting the right answer. And so this is where it really helps to really think about what the student is saying, and can the student convince you of the answer? And if you're convinced of the answer, then that's good enough. If the answer you're not convinced, then that's not enough. Someone is asking about the difference between math exit tickets, math spirals, math IAs. Absolutely, this is a great question. No matter what school you go to, you probably know there's lots of different math assessments and math pieces of work. Math exit tickets or exit tickets for anything are just something that teachers do at the end of the lesson to make sure and to just quickly check in on what the students took away from that lesson today. So as you saw in that video of Kristen, her daughter did a math exit ticket in school. She didn't get it correct. She took it home and was able to resubmit it for credit. Obviously, not every school does that, but to the extent that your child can resubmit those exit tickets, that's a really good learning opportunity for them. It's also really good to see what they're doing in class versus what they're doing at home. Math spirals is another tool a lot of schools use. As you know, we might learn one week about multiplication and the next week the next unit might be about fractions, but real great mathematicians don't think only about fractions, they think about all mathematics together. And so math spirals is a way to make sure that our students are retaining the information we learned in prior units to go into the future. So again, all of these assessments are just different ways to support and understand mathematical thinking and how our students are thinking mathematically. Certainly follow up with your school teacher if you have questions about specifics. How do I know if I'm doing harm by attempting to help them? This is a really great question. I would say a couple of things. One, if math support has been a point of frustration every day for a period of time, I would say it's really good moment to step back and rethink what that support looks like and maybe to loop in the teacher and think about how you can maybe approach it differently moving forward. There are certainly days where I have a lot of struggles with my son. Maybe he's in a bad mood, maybe he's tired, maybe the concept is a little bit difficult for him, maybe I'm in a bad mood or I'm struggling or I'm in a rush. So I wouldn't kind of focus on one day, although I would say get out while you're ahead. But I would say if you're finding that day after day, it's really a negative interaction for your child, I would certainly talk to the teacher and ask for a little bit of help there. Got a couple minutes left. Let's see where I'm going next. How do I encourage my 8th grader to apply margins, plan of attack? Yes. So I think someone's asking about how do I get my kid to write down what they're doing and to show their work more completely. And this is really important. I know it's a point that I see a lot on social media of like, why do I need to show my work? The reason we need to show your work is because it tells us what your scholar knows and what they don't know, right? We can't get into their brain. The best we can do is get them to put what they're thinking on paper. And so in order to best support our students, we need to know what they're thinking. And that's why we really encourage them to get things on paper. It also is a great tool. Great mathematicians write things down. They don't do things in their head largely. The reason they write them down is because if they have to go back and figure out where they went wrong, they're able to do so. And if I'm keeping in my head, particularly as the mathematics gets more advanced, it's hard to go back and see where I made that mistake. And so with anything, really making sure your 8th grader or whoever your scholar is knows why we're asking them to do it and is invested in that reason, I think it's really helpful. If your child doesn't see the purpose of it, I would start there. What is the purpose of it? Multi-step problems. Yes. How do you encourage a more organized showing of work? Yes. This is great. When my 3rd grade son brings his work to me, it's really hard to know where he was thinking. And it's much easier if I watched him do it, because then I can see what he wrote first, second, and third. Obviously, that's not always possible. And most times I'm not sitting with him while he's doing it. I'm seeing it when it's done. And so what I really do is, again, I have no problem helping him understand how to organize things better. So I'll tell him to label things. I'll tell him, I can't read this. Can you write it more clearly? Showing him how to write things more clearly and making him go back and do it again is something I feel very confident doing, because again, how many times have mistakes been made because we can't read our own writing? Yeah, and for those those difficult multi-step problems, 100%, spending time really organizing what you know and really writing down what you're thinking about and talking about it, as Ruben is saying there, I think is really important. But don't worry about the strange name. I actually had this with my first grade daughter yesterday. She couldn't read a name and was getting frustrated trying to sound it out. So I've taught her, just call it D. If the name is Daniel, you can't read Daniel, name him D. Don't worry about the name, it's a waste of time. Okay, we didn't get to everything, but it is time, and I do want to be mindful of all the things that you have going on in your lives. I hope today was useful for you. If we didn't get to your question, I apologize. Please go to social media, chat with RC. We will answer it there. You can always email us. You have our email address from all of the information that you've been getting from us. Thank you for joining. This will be recorded. You'll get an email with the recording so you can rewatch it. You can share it with someone who wasn't able to make it that might be important in your child's homework or in another child's homework. So again, thank you. We hope this was helpful, and we have a survey. If you have a quick moment to give us your thoughts, we'd love to hear them.